for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? It's our first show for 2024. That's because today is Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. Let's do this, man. Very excited about the show tonight and the week and next week and, of course, 2024. And you can help support everything that we do here by getting yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. The links are below. There's 2 shirts. There's 2 ways to get them. You can just order a shirt or you can get a Game Changer membership. The links are below. Everything is signed. Everything includes shipping. All right. The links are below. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt today. And tonight now, before we get started, we were hanging out in the chat right before the show tonight. And I just made this offhanded comment. And I love how the chat just takes off in a direction. And I just made this offhanded comment. Trying to travel less in 2024. It's not really working out. I'm looking at the schedule but I wanted to travel less. I traveled so much in 2023 and it was great. I saw the world. It was amazing. And but this year it was a lot to do this show, to do my TV show, to shoot films and conferences and all the travel. It was crazy. But I got this thing in my life now. My bike, it's called Yngve. By the way, I've named my new scooter Yngve. And I just got back from Miami, and I was just in Miami for like 30 hours for Billy Carson's and Billy and Elizabeth Carson's New Year's Eve party. And I fly in the day before, go to the party ends at midnight. I'm out of there at 1 a.m., back to the hotel, packed straight to the airport, and flew back to L.A. It was, and the whole time I was in Miami, I had a great time. Billy and Elizabeth, it was an amazing party, and it was so much fun. I'm just thinking the whole time, I could be back in L.A. riding right now. I just want to get back. So I made that comment, and I thought, what if I had an AI version of me? What if I had an AI version of me do Fade to Black? Would you know? Would you care? Would you get upset if you found out? What if you didn't know? And I was cheating on all of you. It's the world we live in now. And I'm tempted to see if the technology would work, and maybe just do it once and just sit back, watch. I would be here in the studio just to intercept, just to make sure, but and just click go and see what would happen. It's very interesting, and I think it's entirely possible. I really do. So anyway, and the chat. So the reason why I bring all of that up, the chat was immediately, I forget who said this, but it was funny. But Jimmy, you would have no soul. And that's what I responded. We need your donations. Send your money now, because my AI has no soul. And we're going to find out more about that tonight, because my guest is Maja D'Aoust. Tonight, we are going to be talking about something that I know a little bit about, but I'm here to get my knowledge on, and so are you. the witch's familiar. We're going to be talking about that. And what is a witch's familiar, right? Now, before we even get into that, and I attempt to describe what this conversation may be about, no, we're going to bring in Maja to do all of that. She is a scholar of alchemy and the occult lore, whose interest in alchemy and the esoteric occult sciences spans her entire lifetime. After completing her bachelor's degree in biochemistry, Maja studied Oriental Medicine and acupuncture and later earned her master's degree in Transformational Psychology with a focus on shamanism, the I Ching, and ancestors in her thesis work. Maja Lectures on mysterious topics right here in Los Angeles, and she educates the public community through her nonprofit, The Well-Wishers, which she established with Dr. Kelvin DeWolfe. Now, her website is below. It is called witchofthedawn.com. The link is below. And I would like to welcome, for the first time to Fade to Black, Maja D'Aoust. There she is. She's right there.
Hi there, Jimmy.
How are you, Maja?
I'm doing super good. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.
This is going to be a great night. Before we get started, and this is my first show of 2024, and I had said to you earlier today, this is a great way to kick off 2024. But before we do that, you get the first time guest disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way, which is this, Maja. It's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. Where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. You have to accept.
Marry me and marry part. I accept.
Oh, wow. Well played.
Yes.
Well played. Okay, before we get into familiars, let's actually go plural because there's so many different roads to go down, and certainly the history and the deep history of familiars and what they are and who they are or what they may be, right? It's all of the above. We're kicking off. We just said goodbye to 2023. And today being January 2nd and the perfect vision of looking forward, what do you think? Where are we headed? What are the stars? What's the cauldron? Right?
Wow, you're not holding back, Jimmy. We're just we're gonna go right into the target.
Yeah, we are. What's the crystal ball saying?
Absolutely. And it's so cool that I feel honored that I get to kick this off and be the first guest for this new year. I mean, as many of you may know, if you're, plugged in, 2024 started out with a butt ton of earthquakes all over the planet. The earth was shaking everywhere. We had, I don't know if you saw or you know what I'm talking about. We have Iceland, Japan, in LA, we had a little one, but there's literally earthquakes everywhere at the beginning of the year this year, heading into tsunamis. So I kind of think of the earth as a big creature who's like shaking her skin, like a dog would after it comes out of the water or something when we get these level ups or energizing kickoffs, especially when it corresponds to the new year. And a lot of planets going forward astrologically, we have Jupiter coming out of retrograde. Uranus is about to follow. We have Chiron going direct. We just came out of Mercury retrograde. So everything had been going backward. And then all of a sudden, we get this big push forward into 2024. So I feel very strongly, I know everybody's kind of going through these layers of realization, which we have been since 2012, some of us a little earlier than some people are like, I've been in this a minute, but definitely the general populace since at least 2012 is kicking up notches. So I feel like as we go into 2024, these shakes, this kind of like of everything going forward, I'm excited about it. I feel like all of these illusions are falling more and more. The truth is just coming up like these big swords through everything. So I'm very excited.
And to cap it all off on New Year's Eve, the sun burped
The
and
black hole, yep,
yeah, and released an EMP, which is it's going to graze us tonight, but it
yep,
is the largest solar mass ejection since 2017, and
mm,
it's massive. Now, thankfully, it's not going to be head on. If it was head on, it may be Stone Age, but it's going to graze us. But they're also talking about maybe a disruption in some of the satellite navigation and maybe some communication satellites and so forth. We may see some disruptions, but that also happened at the same time as the earthquakes
that's right.
and what is going on in Iceland. It all happened at the same time. That's not coincidence, is it?
I don't believe in coincidence this far into my experience and journey because I mean, everything is intermeshed, right? I see time space as a big matrix where everything's intersecting at different points. So, coincidence, I don't know. Like, you can just try to see the connections, which you can go all the way into or all the way out of, but definitely it's not a coincidence. It's an energetic pulse that beats at the same time, like a heartbeat or a drum beat, right? And everything comes into a kind of synchronicity in these pulses. So it makes perfect sense that it all happened in that same dance, in that same beat. Yeah.
And the other part, and you mentioned this, but and then we can move on. But it I think that we are in very exciting times. And there seems to be, and you and I in our community, we talk about this stuff all the time, but the rest of the world is getting a little taste of what we what we normally,
Yes.
just keep to ourselves, which is the veil is being lifted, right? Knowledge of stuff is getting out there, and people are hearing about this for the first time, whether it is about UFOs and UAPs and ET and contact, but it's also about consciousness and
Yes.
parallel worlds and the multiverse and other existence and other dimensions and entanglement and telepathy and communicate. All of this stuff was the secret things that we talked about and enjoyed, but now the rest of the world is starting to get exposed to it. Is that veil also going to be part of 2024, the lifting of that and exposing the world to this stuff?
Yes, and I think the most exciting thing to me is that it's not that it's getting exposure and that people are getting access to data. It's that their minds and their consciousness is starting to get inundated with the gnosis of these things. So, like, don't feel for anybody that's not hip, it's not like you have to go do a bunch of research. You have to do some practices that are going to expand your mind, and it's all going to come in like you're drinking from a well. So I'm the most excited that I mean, for those of us that did a lot of labor, maybe there's some anger there because everybody now just gets it because all of the
Right.
like the infantry at the front of the line that have been taking all the hits, now the whole backing get to experience this just directly in. So, I mean, and that links into the familiars, which is that I feel like the more people can try not to just rely on intaking data, but try to have direct experience of this consciousness expansion, that's going to be, I mean, the best, the most exciting, the most thrilling experience that we can have as the year goes forward.
Now, are you okay? Oh, if you brought up such a great point. Are you okay with everybody suddenly having not only exposure to this knowledge, but possibly agreeing with us? Because it was our secret world, right?
Yeah.
It was our fight. You're right. We were on the front lines, but it was also our little private battle, right? And now to let our little community get this wider exposure, I feel kind of a little weird about that, because it was our own little thing and it was us against them. We all can't be on the same team, right? That's the part. I don't know.
It's
I don't
really
know.
challenging for our egos, for sure, because we want acknowledgement for the work that we've put. Some people have sacrificed many lives, right, to get to this point, and it feels weird. But we have to think also about the giants whose shoulders we stand on, like where there, but for grace we go too. Like think about all the people before us. We're part of this arrow shooting through time that, like, no matter how much work I personally do, I couldn't have gotten here if there hadn't been like all those others. If I didn't read Paracelsus, if I didn't read Isaac Newton, like I would have never gotten to this place. So we honor our ancestors before and the generations going forward. But there's like a sting to feel like anybody gets something without doing the work, right? That's always going to be, I think, a thing for our shadow selves that are like, well, what about me? Like, what about what I did or what I do? And we have to honor our shadows and ourselves. I am an ego honorer. So I like to give everybody credit where credit's due. And I think if we can give each other credit and thanks and gratitude, the more we can do that, I think it'll help everybody open those gates and include everybody.
Well, now just the very mention of some of these subjects that we're going to be talking about tonight, and specifically when you brought up Isaac Newton. Okay, so let's alchemy and Isaac was an everyman,
Yes.
right? Religious, mathematician, physicist, right? He studied and he was an alchemist, right?
And he had a
And
job too. He was a lens grinder, right? So he was a laborer as well.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah, he was an everyman. And but today we're all kind of segmented out, but we're all specialized. But he wanted to absolutely understand everything. He wrote tremendous works on religion. He wrote some of the foundations of math and gravity and physics that we still use today. And that was
Remarkable.
300 years. Yeah, yeah, absolutely incredible. But he let nothing stand in his way, and including alchemy. And alchemy, to get to the real alchemy, you do have to put in the work, because you're not going to find that stuff on the internet.
You have
And
to
it was
do it
all,
yourself. You have to
yeah,
do it
that's
yourself.
right. And
Yeah.
that's, if you go back 3, 4, 500 years ago, the alchemists and the alchemist traditions that were there, you had to be invited in. Right? This was that was it was more of a secret society than we understand.
Yes.
And that's
Agreed.
that's the part that I feel a little uncomfortable with, and that maybe some things still need to be a little more sacred.
Well, I think things deserve respect. And so that sacredness, which I think is what you're talking about, is like if everybody just knows how to make nuclear weapons, like this is a bad idea, right? So there are things that need to be kept sacred with respect because knowledge is dangerous. Because if you learn true alchemy, right? It's like in the X-Men where the Dark Phoenix gets to understand how to pull everything apart. Like we can't just have ding dongs and nincompoops running around ripping everything to shreds. And I do feel like those layers of obstacles that we go through on the path is we get tested in order to ensure that we are not going to fall off the equilibrium into destruction. Because if we get certain knowledge, which I think has happened in the past, if we look at alternative histories or, we can speculate. But if certain human beings gain this knowledge without that sacred discipline, without that humility, that the destructive forces gain too much power and it serves as we know, there's a great consequence to not only humanity, but life forms on the planet Earth, to other things in the cosmos. So they do need to be kept. But I feel like there's forces that do that. So I know obviously we can see a lot of havoc wreaked and destruction clearly. So everyone's like, where are those protective forces, right? That's like a giant complaint. Certainly many people have, especially if you experience destructive force. But I do think there are layers that in order to graduate through, you're not permitted to hold that destructive energy to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And everybody wants a shortcut, right? Everybody wants the easy way out. Okay, so you're a bad dude, you're a bad guy. Well, you want the edge up,
Yeah.
right? And or you want to fall in love,
Right.
right? But you want a shortcut. You don't want you want the edge up on
That's
it. It
right.
doesn't matter if it's for good or for bad, but you have to use this correctly. And that's the thing. You can't let this fall into the wrong hands. You could fall in love with something that something would
I
fall in love
agree.
with you that you didn't want chasing you down. That's your fault. You wanted the shortcut, right? And
Consequences are very real. We've reached our midlife and we have felt consequence, and you learn history and you see consequences real. And that's where you get your respect and your humility, is through understanding those consequences. Yes.
I love, it's like one of the oldest, tales in the world, right? You get those three wishes. Your third wish is, dude, take it all back.
That's right. Put it back. Put it back.
Get back in the bottle.
I
I'm
want
done.
the ignorance. Ignorance, please. Your third wish is always for ignorance, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. 100%.
I
100%.
know.
All right. Well, okay. So familiars. Now, what I did find interesting going through my email today from different people, very excited about the show tonight. And I was pretty surprised because I thought that, well, you know what? I have a pretty smart, audience. That I guess that's where the credit goes.
Birds of a
But
feather flock together. Yes.
well, and familiars, we're going to start because there is so many different. I'm going to do my best to try to keep this centered, but this can go in so many different directions. And the history with familiars goes into the deep, deep, deep past.
Yes.
So we should start maybe with a generalization of what a familiar is, and then let's work our way backwards.
Yes, that's really great. I am a big word nerd, so I like to look at the words because I feel like they contain things like a puzzle. So, if we want to understand a familiar spirit, we have to think of the word familiar and what that means, right? Familiar is the same root as family. So, a lot of familiar spirits are maybe something that you've had an exchange with at some point. And so that goes to a lot of levels. It goes from the animal, right? Most people would think of a familiar, we think of a black cat and a witch, right? So but then we know that it can also be other animals. It could be trees, it could be rocks, it can be land, right? So, like, the land of America has a familiar spirit. The land of each river has a familiar spirit, and that is something that dwells or lives there or is known to that thing. What we see, though, when we get deeper into it, is that it extends not just to things on the earth, but familiar spirits can also be sentient consciousnesses, right? So you can have an angel as a familiar spirit, right? The Holy Spirit is a familiar spirit, which is a dove, right? So we can take it, it goes up into these spiritual echelons of consciousness that you can come into a relationship with, like your family. So, family isn't always a chosen relationship. Right? Or some people would argue, like, as you're manifesting, you choose it, right? With our contracts and all that kind of stuff. But family is who we kind of get paired with usually due to affinity, to correspondences, or even if you kind of dwell in a land or on a subject, you kind of get that familiarity. So a familiar spirit can be an animal, it can be a sentient consciousness, it can dwell in the land, it can be an interdimensional spirit that you're forming a relationship with, like a family member, and sometimes even like a husband and wife or a spouse. There's many indigenous cultures, witches, especially in like the European cultures, like Ireland, where you have a familiar spirit that is like a spirit wife or a spirit husband that become your family. So, the easiest definition of a familiar spirit is a sentient consciousness that you have a relationship with, like a family member.
And I can in a modern context, I could hear the conversation. So, Judge, this is how it went down. She left, she left me for Ralph. Who's Ralph? Her familiar spirit. And he came to her and said, I am now your husband. And they've been doing this thing. And you know what? Divorce granted. Boom.
That's right. That's right.
Because the stories of this, it goes back 1,000 years.
That's right.
And you can't really talk somebody out of this, can you? I mean, once they have the experience, the familiar
The
in whatever
experience.
context, right?
Well, think about it. You're a
Replace them.
musician, correct or incorrect?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
You have a familiar spirit. It's your muse.
sure.
So I love talking about this with artists and creatives because I'm sorry, y'all, to break the news to you, but as maybe not every creative has this experience, but the ones that I've met that get to that plateau, you're getting informed and having a relationship with that muse, with that consciousness that is probably on a lot of occasions, probably every time you play music. So it's very much like that. And a lot of creatives will have their muse spouse take the place of their other spouses. That's actually a very common experience for creatives.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can be the boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife of an artist. You can, but you're not going to replace that paintbrush.
Nope.
It's not going to happen. You're not. You can be Jimi Hendrix's girlfriend, but you're not going to be his guitar.
That's right.
It's
So it's
that's a
very
tough.
much like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now, the malevolent benevolent argument
Mhm.
when it comes into this is something that is always put out front,
Yes.
and it has been brought front and center as far back as history goes. We can read about this. We can read about cases like this, different Salem witch trials, right? We can go right there. We can go to Essex. We can go to England and discuss very specific situations where the familiar was deemed malevolent or benevolent. She's a good witch. She's a bad witch. He's
Yeah.
a this. And so what do we do with that? And the connection that so many tried to make, that a familiar has to be a demon.
Yeah,
And
this is one of
that's
my favorite conversations to have, and I do get, a lot of conversations from people of certain religions, different ones even, so not to target any, because I love all religions, and I love reading about every way that people experience spirit. I very much love all of it, but definitely I have gotten hate and attacked by many Christians claiming that, these spirits are malevolent. And so, I mean, I just have to say, I feel like you're going to meet a lot of malevolent spirits in a lot of churches taking over priests. So, like, you cannot convince me that there are not far more dangerous demons in the halls of all the churches. So, I rebuke I rebuke such statements out of hypocrisy. But my answer to the ability to have discernment for malevolent or benevolent spirits is the same as your friends and humans. If I like am friends with George and I know who George is, we can feel, you know, like you talked about earlier with souls. Okay, we can feel souls. You can have that familiarity with a friend. Yes, sometimes they can go off kilter and go down into a dark path and have an experience. I don't know that I would judge them as demonic or being possessed unless certain things are present. But then also, if I'm engaging with a sentience or a consciousness, my discernment hasn't gone away and I can tell shit from Shinola, right? So you can tell, is this bad vibes? Is it good vibes? It's not that hard to tell. People say they're tricky, right? So you can get tricksters, certainly an issue, but no more of an issue than I would experience walking in downtown Los Angeles. So I mean, you got to keep your discernment cap on and pay attention just like you would walking down the street and be aware, be discerning, be present. We don't need to be afraid. I always get so surprised, especially when Christians talk about how it's scary when Jesus, the Christ, to my knowledge, went up to all demons in order to exorcise them and was very confrontational and worked a lot to deal with that. I work with a lot of shamans, I work with a lot of healers, and nobody's scared of any demons, right? Unless you're not practiced enough, you don't have discipline enough to engage or confront that. And I say it in humility, not like I could take on any demon. I'm not that dumb, right? But you go forward like you would anywhere, including in a church.
I let me ask you this before we move on. I don't let I want to say this as as kindly as I can. I don't give a crap about demons or the devil or negativity or evil spirits. I don't give a crap. I think about positive things, and I would rather spend my day smiling than tripping, and therefore I don't see it. I never feel it. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but those are my choices.
Mhm.
Is that a safe road to go down?
That's a really good point. I navigate a lot of clients who are absolutely overtaken by negativity, by negative energy, by so I see it a lot, right? So I'll deal with, and certainly over the pandemic, I've lost people to suicide. I deal with a lot of addicts trying to recover. There's a lot, or people that have trauma, serious, severe trauma, who have been violently traumatized, rape, everything. So I do see negative energy. I see it all over in everybody. But what I would say, if you're going to adapt an attitude, like you say, to choose positivity, I think that that is a navigational tool for you to engage with the world. And it's like you have a compass that way. I feel strongly that if we are able to take that positivity into places where maybe it has been overrun or corrupted with negativity, especially people through no fault of their own, or even like however you want to see, like people that have been ruined, if we can not deny them that negative energy, to sit with it, to see it, uh, to have it be there. But like you said, choose to keep our center. I think that's what can kind of like make a positive infection, almost like a disease would spread. I feel like that can spread also the same way, where we can shift or make a difference for people holding grief, violence, trauma, like all of these very deep, intense energies. So having that positive attitude, I mean, it could be enough. could very well be enough to do that.
Now, the question, and staying with that, the question that I think everybody would ask first is, well, how do I know about my familiar? How
Yes.
do I know if it's good? How do I know if it's got my best intentions in play? How do I know I'm not being tricked? How do I know if it's good or bad or evil or what do you say to somebody when they ask that, the most obvious question?
It's obvious, but not. Um, it's the same as how you choose a mate or how you choose your friends,
Can
like,
you
how do you.
deny a familiar?
Oh, yeah. Sure. And there's lots of them that you can attune to, but there could be some that we're assigned to kind of like a family, but the same way you could deny your toxic family member. Okay, for example, right? Which I support people in doing. It's not always the best thing. We all want to try as much as we can, but if we have toxic family members, you also deserve boundaries. You deserve health and well-being, right? We don't have to. I'm a self-defense advocate, so I'm always going to say choose your safety, right? But you can absolutely deny or rebuke any spirit that you don't feel comfortable, just like you could a friend or a family member that has crossed a boundary or crossed a line into that. But how, in terms of like, how do you know? There's a lot of ancient disciplines for how to go about this. One of the probably most prevalent in all the cultures would be a vision quest, right? So, the way that we can connect with, see, or link up with our familiars is you got to do spiritual labor. And in most of the cultures, and in my own personal experience, we have to do a vision quest. And that means a lot of work. It means a lot of purging your perceptions. It means fasting. It means labor, spiritual labor. But that is how you're going to come into a dialogue. You can do it in kind of less invasive ways through engaging divination, through prayer. Like, say you're a Christian and you want to come into a contact with your personal relationship with Jesus, even would be you have to go through these labors of clearing your perception, clearing your heart. That means like you're going to have to go through some abstinence, although for some cultures you can also engage in hedonism, right? The other way, you can go to one or the other extreme in order to shift your perceptual ability enough to come into dialogue with them.
Can you be both?
I think so.
That's the world I want to be.
Yeah, you're a centrist. A centrist. Yeah.
Yeah. I want a centrist familiar.
Yeah.
Little hedonistic, but take me to the light.
It
So
might shift. You have to journey.
now, the idea behind a familiar can be actually very familiar. A good luck charm, or somebody, a general going into battle with only his lucky boots on,
Yeah.
or his pet cat, whatever it may be. But that's a familiar too, isn't it?
They very much have fetish familiars, right? Which would be an object that you're 100% correct. And like I said earlier, it could be a rock as well, right? So there can be material objects that can take on that quality because it's something that you have a relationship with, right? These relationships that we come into as human beings on the earth, we're forming these kind of anchors to our reality that our soul makes to our memories, right? That's why a lot of times ancestors are also familiar spirits, because we're engaging with the material world in a way where we can set these waypoints or anchors in the form of these, like, I've been here before. I know you. I know you've been around this block before. Can you give me a tour? Right?
Right.
Familiar.
Familiar. And now also we were talking about Essex and the Salem witch trials. the identification of somebody with a familiar, and you brought up black cat, but that's a really good example of this, that some were identified and persecuted not only in Salem and Essex but throughout history because of the familiars that were labeled around them. Therefore, it's kind of like a Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's made of wood, so she must be a witch, right? It's kind of like that, where they would make these connections.
That's
And
right.
it was always back to the familiars, wasn't it?
A lot of the times, and that a lot of that was around even in Egypt when certain religions, not just Christianity, but also even when like Muslim traditions came forward, or any religion really that was trying to bully or dominate the land in order to take over or push its beliefs. The first thing you would look for in order to identify a pagan or someone practicing a certain religion, you could bet that they were going to have a familiar. And so, one of the main ways, for example, in Egypt, if you were a worshiper of Bast, you had cats all over the place. So as Emperor Theodosius was coming in, pushing the takeover of Christianity, if you owned cats, that identified you as a pagan. And so you would be murdered or attempted to change over to Christianity. So the way that people had these identifiable familiars, even like Vikings, you can go all the way up into the Norseland, all through Asia. As even as communism spread, they could identify any of the Taoist practitioners because they had some of these familiar spirits that they were utilizing.
Now, our familiar spirits or familiars. So let's take spirit off for a second. I jumped ahead of my skis. Are familiars generally in your world considered helpers, assistants?
I feel like generally, yes. In my experience, correct. So my experiences are that I get data and information. So very much the best way I can describe my experience is like how Socrates talked about his daemon. And so, and similar to the muse for the musician, the genius word comes from gen or generative spirit or generational or ancestor or kind of like a sentient family spirit that you come into contact with. And the predominant way I experience it is getting data that I 100%, there's no way I could know it any other way. Things like warnings of danger, like heads up for like things that I need to do, or like sometimes just streams of downloads of data that is sent to me. Now, have I never experienced a malevolent spirit? I have. Would I say that I identified that as a familiar? It wasn't in me. It was with exterior sources. So I personally have not had an experience of a familiar that was not a helper. But I'm certain that, other people have because it's been written about so much. So, but for my person, I would say no. And certainly I have feedback from others as well that the data gained and my participation was also helpful. I could say in the thousands of people that I've dealt with, of course, there's going to be some that would disagree, and that's fine. But the feedback I get is that number is very small, very minute compared to the people who actively tell me that it was helpful, that the data information that I received from the familiar was very helpful.
So, the voices in my head, right? The voices in my head. And I'll share something with you. This is going to be very brief. It could be a long story. I'm going to give you the very short version of it. But it's a classic. It's been told so many times. I'm driving. I got a green light, right? There are two people standing, waiting to go into the crosswalk to my right. I see them. I see the green light. Everything is cool. the two people, one of them, the lady, stepped into the crosswalk, forced me to tap on my brakes.
Yeah.
I'm watching them. I see the green light and I tap on my brakes to slow down, thinking, man, I hope she doesn't step in front of my car. At that moment, this white, large pickup truck ran the red light. If she hadn't have stepped to the street, I don't tap on my light, I get broadsided by a pickup truck doing 50 miles an hour. Now, is that a familiar, right? Is that that sounds like some help
That's
to me.
help.
Right.
And that's how Socrates described his daemon exactly. So your experience is right on track with what I'm stating. I had two experiences where I do a lot of walking, and so I was walking, and there was someone pushing their child, their little toddler, in one of those cars, like the little baby cars where they're pushing it and the kid's riding. And so the parent was behind, and I was walking past them, and I heard a literal voice shout in my ear, although there was no voice that shouted. But the voice said, "Look out." And it came from where the child was. The child jumped up off of its car and was running directly into the street. Because I heard that voice, I went and grabbed the child and stopped it from getting hit by a car. Okay. So there was no person that shouted, but it was very similar to your experience where it was like an alert to danger. And that was very much how, like, Socrates described, and I've heard many people describe the same. So, and I have multiple stories very similar to yours. So that is like the guardian, helper, spirit experience of the familiar. Yes,
Now,
beautiful.
why don't more people pay attention? Right? Well, the voice in my head said don't do it. Well, what's the voice in your head? Ah, it's nothing. It's nothing.
Right.
They want to go right back to being pragmatic, which it's like there's nothing wrong with that. But when the voice in their head says don't do it or do it, go ahead and buy that lottery ticket, whatever it may be.
Right.
But they'll admit to it to a point, but that's it. It stops right there. Why is that? Why is everybody so reticent to take the next step?
It's been severely stigmatized over generations, right? We're taught that that's a sign of mental illness, which is sometimes true also, right? There's, of course, the old adage of the angel and the demon on your shoulder. And then it's like you said earlier, like, how do I know what voice to listen to and whose voice am I hearing? Say you're an empath and you're picking up someone else's voice too, which happens to a lot of people that I know. So that's where we have to learn these tools. And I can't stress enough that my main advocacy for everyone listening to this show would be to go and study the Socratic technique, because Socrates and many of the ancient Greeks and much of the esoteric wisdom teaches you how to have that discernment, to tell that difference of which voice do you listen to and which one might be harmful. Similarly, in Christianity too, where they tell you to disregard all these voices, they come into constant dialogue with Jesus and their heart. And I'm like, that sounds like the same thing. So sometimes it's also called your right. I mean, come on. Like, what?
Yeah.
This isn't, we did live on the same planet. Like, I know there's all kinds of weird critters here, but like, come on. So it's sometimes described as our conscience, or like a Jiminy Cricket to Pinocchio, which, by the way, was written by a Freemason and based on all of these same principles that I'm talking about. So
Right.
having that Jiminy Cricket, oh yes, look up Pinocchio. It's fascinating, fascinating. That Jiminy Cricket trying to advocate for you, trying to give you those advice of like the don't do it, or sometimes people get those harmful voices that advocate, which, like I said, I've had a lot of experience with those too that are in people, and I can feel them immediately right away. It's very clear when someone's got the black hole in their consciousness, right? But so when we get these warnings, these advices, these things, why can't people hear them? I truly believe everyone has a capacity to come into a relationship with these exchanges, but it's been stigmatized. We've been told not to do it, that it's dangerous, that it's evil, right? Don't listen to your heart. Do anything but listen to
Right.
your heart, right? So it has, I think a lot of it has been beat out of people. I think some of it's density of our experience of being in fear constantly or having different experiences on the planet, that it has kind of like removed people from their ability through the density of the earthbound experience.
Well, and we see it. We see examples of that. If you go back to the Flintstones, I'm just pulling
Yeah.
something out of the top of my head. You bring up Jiminy Cricket. We could go into Fred Flint. What was the Great Kazoo?
That's right.
Remember?
My God, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Now. So, would you define the Great Kazoo was awesome,
So good.
and but nobody saw him but Fred, right? And giving Fred that advice, just trying to help Fred out. That's all he was trying to do. Now, is with the Great Kazoo,
I love it so
is
much.
I know, is the Great Kazoo somebody's guide or somebody's familiar, or is it just semantics?
I feel like they're very similar, right? So I think, what is a guide? What are you talking about? Right? So
Right,
it's all different words to describe the same experience of coming into a sentient exchange in a relationship way with another consciousness. Right? It's
right.
all the same. Whether that's your higher self, whether it's your heart, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Archangel Gabriel, whether it's your cat, whether it's your pet, whether it's a crystal, right? These are irrelevancies. The point is you're having a sentient exchange and a relationship.
Somebody just said Fred and Barney could both see
Oh,
Kazoo.
Barney could too. Oh,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
data.
I don't remember that, but okay. I see. That's why my audience is the best.
That's right.
Can you share a familiar? And
I
when we
love
come
this.
back, okay, we're going to take a break here in 5 minutes. Let's stay with this. I can't wait for this to continue because I want to know where they come from too, as well. I mean, can you? Okay, wait a minute. Let's back up. Hold on. I love this show.
Good.
Can you share a familiar?
Yes, and I know that that is controversial, but I feel like many cults are formed around familiars 100%. And I've had personal experiences where multiple people heard a voice that was the same, right? So you could even take the Lady of Guadalupe as an example, where we have shared experiences of a
Mm,
sentient entity
mm.
delivering conscious exchanges with groups of people. So 100% that is verified through history.
You
Yes.
know what? I just spoke and answered my spirit guide, Saint Michael, whatever. Right. Well, I think everybody's got that same. Yeah. Okay. So that's definitely a
Yes.
shared
Yes.
familiar.
That's right.
Ah, okay. When we come back, we're going to take a break here in a second, but I want to set up for when we come back, which is this. Can you leave a familiar to somebody in a will?
I like it.
Can you? Can you? Yes or no?
Yes, because it can be a family spirit, like an ancestral. Yeah. Mhm.
Really?
Or like
I'd
a
be
guru, like a lineage. Think about a lineage, right? Yes.
right. You get the company, you get the house, you get $5 million. You get Alice.
I'll take Alice. Thanks.
You get Alice the familiar.
That's
Oh
right.
man, yeah. Because they can be handed down, they can be given to you, they can approach you and say, "Hello, my name is Bob, and I'm your familiar." You have those versions of it, but can you exchange? And I know it's a modern word to say, can you exchange? And then what if you are bequeathed and gifted a familiar that you don't want?
I think you can reject it. I'm very much like, I believe that we have some will, some agency. I'm a free willer. So I do feel like if I'm not feeling your vibe, I'm also going to cut off a friend too if they get too weird. So I think, yes, sometimes they may be clingy, but you have to then do clearing rituals, do clearing techniques, cleanses, things like this to just scoot them out.
Now, okay, we're going to continue this when we come back. There's way too much, but can you? It's one thing to be a helper, right? But can will a familiar do bad things for you?
Hmm.
Helping you is it sounds like helping you bake a cake, for instance. But can it help you rob a bank?
Yes, it can help you rule a nation and do
Right.
terrible things. Of course, every national ruler, including presidents. Remember when President Bush said that God told him to do the war on Iraq?
Yeah. I think it
Was that a
was
good
both.
thing that it did or a bad thing that
Was
his
that both?
spirit helper did for him, right?
I think it was both Bushes too as well. That somebody was bequeathed a familiar. Let's take our break
So
right
good.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. All right. Let me ask you this really quick. When somebody brings up a familiar, are they exposing themselves to being labeled a black a black witch? People want to say
Sadly, yes. For
right,
ignorant bigots, I think yes. Mhm.
and we'll continue this when we come back, but how do we fight that? Right, because it's the stigma, right, that has
Yep.
been labeled going back hundreds of years. You may not have done a bad thing in your life, but once that label is there, how do you get rid of it?
I like to remind them of the spiritual relationships that they have and how it's no different, right? So we always deal with those accusations of which are really like a bully. I see it like a bully, right? Like you're no good, I'm good. They're setting up a slant, right? You're not on the level, you're on a slant where it's like I'm good, you're bad. And I'm like, well, let's equal that ground out a little. How exactly are you different than me in your spiritual practice? Let me know. And then they always say, well, it's because mine is this name and yours isn't. So then I'm like, nah, I don't know, man. I've been teased on the playground too much to fall for it.
Maja D'Aoust. Tonight we're talking about familiars. This is Faded Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with a Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Maja D'Aoust. We are talking about a subject that most may not know a whole lot about what we're talking about. Tonight, we're talking about familiars. And now there has been, and I'm not going to speak from some position of great intellect on the subject. I've known of familiars. I have read some stuff about familiars over the years, and I'm a little familiar with the subject. But tonight I want to get my knowledge on, and I've always had questions. And now we were talking about, the great kazoo and the Flintstones earlier, but this is an exposure to something like that at a very young age where that's a possibility, right? And it's always been there for me. But here's welcome back, Maja. And here. How do we know when we have a familiar?
It's to me, it's about a repetition of synchronicities and the way something feels. So for me, it was that I could tell the dialogue that I was engaging in, number one, wasn't mine, right? You kind of get to know your inner voice, your inner self. I mean, hopefully, right? As we go along, you can tell like you. Like I'd be like, "Oh, that's Jimmy." You can tell like that's you. And so you'll start to have some exchanges and they feel the same, or it has like an essence to it, just like you would if you were talking to different people. So just like you can tell your friends apart, you can tell when you're engaging with a certain presence. And I feel like the best way that I could describe it is like a presence. Certainly for some people, it will have a visible facade, like how it looks, right? Like in the Flintstones or Jiminy Cricket, right? So it'll have a form, or like your cat, right? It'll take on a familiar face. And even certainly in a lot of traditions, they say that spirit always takes the form that is going to look familiar to you so that you can be receptive. And that was a big problem even throughout the Bible, where people would start to engage with divine, or however you want to call them, angels. And the first thing that happens is that you're terrified because they're terrifying and not. Angels certainly are probably more terrifying than any of these like concerns people bring up with familiar spirits, 100%. And definitely more on the powerful end of those. But so for me, I think the best way you can tell is that there's a repetition of engagement. Okay, so in other words, it's not just going to be a one off or a single time, but rather it starts to be integrated into your daily life, into your experiences, where you'll have an exchange with that sentience.
Now, okay, let's say I'm just going to pull, because there are so many examples of familiars, but I'm just going to, the first thing that pops in my head is like a toad.
Yeah.
And we've heard this over the years. Okay, now let's say I'm on my back porch and a frog, a toad, jumps up and looks at me and says, "All right, dude, mi familia," right?
That's right.
I can't tell anybody about that. I
You could tell
can't.
me.
Right? Right? You just don't. You don't go out on a date and say these things to
And yet it
somebody.
happens a lot, and like you said, it's in a lot of media, like, remember the cartoon, the Disney animation for Pocahontas where she goes to talk to Grandmother Tree, for example, right? So, the fact that you can't tell somebody that you got your buddy the toad, to me is a travesty, number 1, and also how boring are your peeps if you can't tell them. I mean, certainly there if you, like, are in high school or children, will do it all the time. There's no holding back, where we'll have these kind of exchanges like, "Mom, I thought that crow was laughing at me." This was something my daughter there was this crow that would hang out, and I swear it was the same freaking crow, and my daughter would always complain that it was laughing at her. So she was having this, like, awareness and exchange with this creature that was sharing where we lived. They live here too. If you go see that toad all the time, he probably lives nearby, man. They're present, sentient creatures that are sharing it. So why would it be so weird that you're having an exchange with another living being that is on the land that you live on?
Yeah, but there's a certain line we just don't cross, isn't there? And okay, it's all right, and I can tell you a million stories about my good luck guitar pick,
Yeah,
right? Can't leave home without it. Can't play a gig without this in my pocket. If I leave home without this, we're turning the car around, or
got
there's
it.
going to be no show tonight. Well, I can talk about that, right? People understand that, but talking to a frog is probably the line in the sand when it's actually the same thing,
It is.
isn't it?
That's right.
It's strange.
And speaking with plants too, so like many of the shamans I've engaged with, like especially from Africa or other places, they'll have conversations with the plants that have a kind of, and for those of you who are psychonauts and have done a psychedelic, or anyone who's done an Aya journey, has a voice, a sentience. It is its own thing. You meet Mama Aya, and there's no mistaking her. No mistaking her, and you're going to have a full-on conversation. So people seem to be very willing to accept that we can have these dialogues in terms of acceptable means, whether that's like psychedelic or drug related. But then somehow, if we put it into other natural forms, now it's crazy, right? Crazy.
And okay, so when and I've read these accounts over the years, and you're right. Whether it's presented in a religious context or it's part of a deep philosophical belief or a philosopher's writings, that go back a long ways, where this presence appears in front of somebody and says, okay, I am here and this is what is going on.
Yes.
Today we lack the right words. That's today. Back then they had even less of a vocabulary. And so trying to understand what Socrates is a great example of this, but it goes back into every single culture where these beings of light have appeared in front of somebody and then spoke and identified themselves.
Yes.
Is that today? Is that a familiar? And is it like we don't have the right words to use? So today we use familiar.
That's right.
Is that what we should exchange throughout history?
I think a lot of people will disagree with me. And of course, this is just my opinion. As I look through, number one, reading the exchanges, the type of feeling that it has, the nature of it. So some people might say, you're crazy. A familiar is just a cat, right? And none of the rest of what we're talking about counts. But my experience and the experience of other witches who are engaging with nature, engaging with, plants, engaging with rivers, engaging with these, it is unmistakable and palpable. So it almost seems foolish to try to describe it to somebody that isn't going to understand that sentient exchange. Like you're talking about, like with your pick, like you have a relationship. How are you going to tell somebody about that? Right. Sometimes I like to think about it when you have a really good friend. A lot of times you can't tell other people about the conversations you have with your buddy, right? With your bestie. Like they're not going to get it. You speak in like a different language. There's like an understanding, as I got that from Stanislaus Klosowski de Rola. He told me very specifically, he goes, you don't understand, you innerstand. And I always love that, where you'll come into that zone where you just get it. Now you have like a secret club. And so how could you explain that to someone? I think it's the same as if you have like a buddy or a bestie, and you could write a million books and you'll never quite be able to get that across to someone unless they've really had that experience also of like a kind of intimacy, that familiarity, that understanding that we can have with each other, with ancestors, with the land, where you just get it. It comes across, So, yeah.
Okay. I just have to know, who is your familiar?
Well, I have a few. So I've done a lot of death work with folks because I've had people in my family pass away. And I try to help other people through grief. And as I was doing a lot of different exploring and, trying to feel my way through, I came across Cybele, who was really a goddess, an ancient goddess, who kind of started all the oracle stuff. And then I came into feeling these spirits that kind of were like the guardians of the graves, or the inner earth, through as I started working with people through their grief and through death and even my own grief. And so that was a presence that came forward, but that tends to show up as I'm doing that particular work with people. So she's not always there, thank goodness.
Mm.
And I don't want that all the time either. Like, honestly, I've had enough death work. Like, please don't solicit me for that. I'll do it if it comes along, but I'm not trying to get that going on because it's, gnarly and very dense. So, but she'll show up for that. And then I'll have, if I'm speaking or engaged in relating topics, I have this guy. I guess you would say he's like an angel. He's definitely masculine presence that comes in and will deliver data to me. And he's a very different feeling than the death goddess that shows up sometimes. He's identified himself and as something very different. And then I have had exchanges with some of my ancestors that have passed away, my loved ones and my folks. And then I've had a conversation with the Ohio River that was completely real. And by the way, the Ohio River is very angry that we keep throwing dead bodies into it. So please stop putting bodies in the Ohio River. It's tired of carrying our blood. But so I feel like I have had a lot of different exchanges with familiar spirits. And then on a journey where I feel like I went on a psychonaut journey a little too far. I did have an exchange with a sentience that I can't really identify or put into words that did not feel like the earth. Did not feel like from anything I could describe. I would best describe it as alien, I guess. That was very
Really?
different than the others. Yes.
Okay, we're going to circle back to that. Okay, all right. Let's pin that one to the wall for a second. So if the Ohio River is pissed off,
Yeah.
What about Lake Mead?
I haven't had an experience with Lake Mead. Have
You
you?
need to reach out. I read a lot about Lake Mead. They find another body there about once a week.
Oh,
Remember when we were going through the drought, the last few years, and Lake Mead dropped. So the beach there, every day somebody was tripping over a fresh set of bones. And they started at, now whether it was, I don't know, gangsters and the mafia dropping off, some guy with a bent nose and, I don't know. I don't know. But I would assume that Lake Mead wasn't happy about that. So you might want to reach out. With that, though, why is it that, going back to your point about contact with the dead and doing death work and graves, and that's a point where I could see a lot of religions demonizing this subject right there. I mean,
absolutely. Which I think is it's hilarious, especially when Catholics do it, because I remind them that they keep the bones and relics of saints in almost every altar of every Catholic church that there is. And that the big cathedral in Rome is literally built over a necropolis. So I'm like, maybe you can let me know and let me in on how that's any different there, guys. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, it's throughout history.
That's right.
And is it also because they don't like competition?
I do feel like there's a little bulliedness. Again, that slant, right? You're not on the level if you're trying to put yourself up above somebody else. We need to greet each other in inclusion and as family, right? So it could be bully. They seem to claim, right, that but I have a whole chapter in the familiar book that deals with the Witch of Endor and how that whole thing was handled. But I would say that there are some pretty palpable arguments that there's no small amount of necromancy going on in the churches as well. So I know that'll make a lot of people really mad. But look, there's bones all over. And I think if we can obviously we don't want to use the dead disrespectfully, but if we need to connect to death. Look, our culture is atrocious. My experiences I feel like are so valuable because I can see that there is a thing after death. You can see that there's all this other stuff. And so to be able to have an experience where engaging with ancestors brings you into a tie of understanding death, having a non fearful relationship of death, of understanding what's beyond it, I don't feel like that's dangerous or evil at all.
The okay, this is where things are going to take a little bit of a turn.
I like
But the world of science does not want to discuss these issues But yet Isaac Newton embraced these issues
Yes.
and elevated his mind and introduced the world to so many things because he had an open consciousness and
Yeah.
considered everything. But today it's not that kind of world. This is a subject that science doesn't want to discuss. But yet the world of physics wants us to believe in the multiverse, right? To believe in,
As long as it's
in
not us, right? I always love the physicists, right? They're describing all these concepts. They're so smart and they're going to talk all about it, but then they're going to remove the humanity from it, even though they're talking out of a human mouth, right? But
and
somehow,
thinking, they're laughing, they taste food, they enjoy or hate things,
that's right.
right? But they don't want to discuss why.
It's non-integrated, I feel like, right? Or we're like dissociating it through those conversations that want to keep physics in a place that is anywhere but our own bodies.
Well, that's always the question. Is consciousness of the physical or is it non-physical?
Yes.
And they want to constantly measure, they want to quantify, they want to put it into numbers, they want to put it into math, something that they can see and touch and throw into a lab. They're okay with that, right? So therefore consciousness must be physical. It's a chemical situation.
Right.
But I'll say this, the most spiritual person in the world is a physicist when the plane is going down.
That's correct.
I
No, it's
guarantee.
true. I think it's sad that there's so much division, and I love so many physicists. Like one of my favorites, Wolfgang Pauli, who had large exchanges with Carl Jung. They even wrote letters back and forth to each other about the girls they had crushes on, which is quite a fun read. But Wolfgang Pauli was an extensive physicist who was trying to merge those worlds. You can see Schrodinger also looked into it greatly. We see, I mean, I could list a lot of them, but so many physicists, especially the ones that studied the alchemists. Okay, so once people start looking at physics and then they start going back in time and reading some of these tones, like Anastasius Kircher, like Isaac Newton, like all of these predecessors and the giants that they're standing upon, they see, holy macaroni, this is me too. When they see the cosmic man or the cosmic human in that parameter, which they have not received from their modern teachings, because for whatever reason, the humanity has been leached out of the education and the sciences, which is like, I love science. I study science. I love the scientific method, but somehow so much of the heart and soul of science has been removed. And I do feel like if we can re-include some of these alchemical philosophical principles and re-include ourselves into it, I mean, yeah, maybe we'll become better integrated.
Well, you bring up such a great point in that we're all born with a clean mind. Okay. And you know, that first 4, 5, 6 years of our lives asking a zillion questions and tripping out on everything and just then you go into the education system and maybe you become an artist, but maybe you become a scientist. And if you become a scientist of any kind, that's when the dogma's just pummeled into your head.
Yes.
And you lose sight of everything else and the wonderment of the world. But as you get older, that I think it's a phase, because the older physicists, right, the guys that are facing their own mortality
Yep.
in a morose way, you know what the last things that they talk about, you know, in the twilight of their careers, they start talking about time travel.
Yeah.
They start talking about consciousness.
Suddenly they're
start
trying to
talking
download their consciousness onto computers, right? They're trying to figure it all out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's that it gets educated out of them. But I think we all start with it and then we end with it too as well, because those are the bigger questions, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and there's the stigma and pressure. So it's so sad too, because I think so many of these individuals have so much valuable things to share on that level, but they, for fear of being, ostracized by their peers. I mean, for heaven's sake, Schrodinger was trying to engage in biology studies, and he was practically laughed out of the room. They were like, the biologists are like, you can't do that. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, there's so much disintegration. So, yeah, I 100% agree that if we can return to the fool's mind, which again, the philosophers and the alchemists are trying to teach us, and certainly techniques I have learned, like from Dr. Kelvin DeWolfe, he's like, no, you can't learn anything from me. I'm going to teach you how to get your mind empty so that you can really know, so you can really see, so you can really perceive. But these are techniques that have been all but lost, especially to our most intelligent minds.
You're right. And who's like the most quoted physicist today? Schrodinger. I mean, people drop his name when they want to sound smart. I'm talking about other physicists, right?
That's right.
It's really, I'm like, man, you really need to take a look back and see what he went through, and
Read his
so
book.
many others.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. And I'm going to bring this up. I want to stay on the subject, science and consciousness, because Brian Greene, Till the End of Time, his new book, his latest book, I should say. I can't wait for his new one. But in the end, now I'm not saying Brian is spiritual, but he's spiritual-ish. Okay, but he doesn't, like other popular physicists, you've got your fan club and your fan base around you, and you can't freak them out and you can't rock the boat. So you've got to play in bounds. But he's been throwing slow pitches. He's been underarm, softball pitches about where his mind is going. And in his new book, Maja, it's like this crazy. And so the first time that I read it, I went back and I've read it 100 times just to make sure I'm not reading into this. It's my imagination. But he says, at the end of everything, when it's all done, and photons and electrons and particles break apart and the universe disappears, all that's left is thought. Now, just stop and think about what he is saying.
Yeah.
And he clearly says there will be clouds of thought, of thinking. These are his words.
So he's a pagan, is what it sounds like.
Right.
This is like, Atum, right? These are the archons. It's the archetypes, is what he's talking about.
That's exactly right. And now he can't say the alternative words. Right, he can't use those, right? But he can describe it in these, in these what, like I said, it's like an underarm softball slow pitch, right? And just throwing this out there, because if we go with what he is saying, then that's how creation continues. And that's how the next universe, the intelligent, the all-knowing, the great kazoo, right? right. And
the
then
wizard,
right. And it was amazing for me to read this. But yeah, I think that maybe he's in his twilight years, and now he feels easier talking about these subjects.
That's very fascinating, because that's in my studies, in my traditions that I've looked at, that is the arrogance. Right. That's the arrogance of Lucifer. And it's in, I don't know if you know, The Wrinkle in Time, right? Where the little boy is going, and it's all broken down into thoughts and math. And he's like, that's all there is thoughts. This is the classic statement of Lucifer, right? So this is the arrogance of the entity that makes that statement that you just said that he made. So from my perspective, that's very fascinating. Right.
It is. Well, it's a way of, because in the world of physics, you're not even allowed to say the word consciousness.
Yeah.
It's illegal. You'll go
Now
to
you're
jail.
woo. That's woo.
You can't do it, and so it's his way of doing that. And you're right about A Wrinkle in Time. I'm fascinated that you brought that up. How did in the fourth grade, my teacher, Mrs. Lafferty,
I love that
read,
you remember her name.
why? A Wrinkle in Time. So she would read to the class like for an hour a day or a half hour a day, right? And like one semester, whatever, she read A Wrinkle in Time. And I'm telling you right now, I was like, I couldn't wait for her to start the next, right? And the theatrics of the mind, the theater of the mind, what that book did to me at the age of 8. Oh man, it ruined me. Love that book. I
It took you
absolutely
into
love that book.
multidimensional thinking.
I love that book. Oh man. So but if I want you to take this the wrong way.
Yes.
When you meet someone, let's say you're on a date, and this is advice that you're going to give to the audience, and give to me too as well. How do you bring up these subjects? Can you bring up A Wrinkle in Time at dinner with somebody that you've just met, or these concepts of consciousness and familiars? How do you do that, or is this something you just keep to yourself?
It's a really important question that I will address with due humility because there are consequences, right, for broaching certain subject areas. So that's a valuable question. For me, I just do it anyway because I get to, because of who I am. But say I get messages all the time from people all over the country or in other countries. I've had peeps that I know that are in extremely oppressive countries where you don't get to talk about that at a big consequence, right? So I would say for most folk, if you do want to bring it up in the conversation, the best way to do it is transpersonally. So to try to broach it in a way that's not directed at their person or from a personal approach, but rather as a subject matter of through books are a good way. I like using humor, exploration, or like, what are your thoughts on blah, blah, blah? So you kind of leave it open, right? Instead of directing it as like, are you this? Do you think that? Or you could say like, what do you think about what this person thinks? So where we could try to have a dialogue about things where it's not. So it's hard. I feel like since there's been so much polarization, right? Everybody is getting so triggered and offended if they think something's going into a territory that they had maybe a negative experience with through propaganda or somebody introducing something the wrong way. So they're threatened to have these conversations, right? Because then that's this. So everybody's going so polarized. So I would try to bring it up in an open, transpersonal way that could open a dialogue without threat. Could be maybe all we got left.
So, okay, let's say you do through proxy, as you're suggesting, right?
That's it. You nailed
That
it. Yeah.
okay, so you do it through proxy. And so let's say it's me. All right. Okay. I'm just using me as an example and the chat room can laugh. But let's say it's me and I go, man, so I was reading on CNN today, or I was reading, I saw something on Fox that they're going to talk about UFOs in Congress. And did you read that news today? And if somebody comes back with, that's just some crazy shit, do you back off? Do you change the subject? Right? You've got your answer.
I would go in there though, because I'd be like, well,
You would?
maybe it's crazy shit, but they're talking about it nonetheless in Congress. What do you think about that there's this crazy shit being brought up in Congress? I would
You
push it,
would,
but
you
I'm
would,
kind of
you
a
would.
pusher. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Wow. I feel that our community is so happy and relieved. They feel pressure being lifted off of them because finally this
Yes.
stuff is being discussed not only in the media and in Washington, but in bars and
Yes.
restaurants. And it's no longer this taboo subject that you had to keep in your nightstand drawer. Right? Right?
Buy your Bible, hopefully.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right next to your Bible.
That's right.
And because when you keep it in the closet or in your nightstand drawer, it's gnawing at you. It's torment, and you're not able to. Well, I'm just going to say it. Come out of the closet, right?
Yes.
You have to
Yeah.
stay in, and it's frustrating and it's rough. But finally, there's that release valve. That pressure is starting to come off, and I'm happy for the community in that regard. But
Yes.
that doesn't mean you bring it up on your first date.
I know. There's still a lot of or maybe you do to quicken the vetting, right? I'm always like, let's hasten the vetting, in my opinion, but I'll just put it all out immediately myself. I'm getting impatient, but I do feel like it can help too if you're able to do some inner work on going through judgment, right? And your relationship to judgment and being judged. And how, I was really overweight when I was in school. And so I had to deal with getting flack from people or negative attention and judgment. And that we kind of do different levels of work where you have to go through the vanity stage of humanity and become familiar with it and to kind of get into your relationship with judgment and being judged. And I mean, again, with humility, right? Because there's severe consequences. Many people, if you come out of the closet on certain things, you'll face violence or abuse or oppression or whatever. So you have to be discerning for danger. But otherwise, try to work on your relationship with being judged by others. Yeah.
I I used to judge. I used to judge internally. Now it's the same thing. Now it's called discernment. But anyway,
That's right.
I meet some. Let's go back 40 years. I'm like 21, 22 years old. I meet someone. She's cool, beautiful, hot, all that. She invites me back to her place, right? Hollywood. Walk in her apartment door, and I'm not making this up. And it's all clicking, right? She turns on the lights, and on her, let me back up. She turns on her lights, and I see on the shelf a crystal ball right across the
Nice.
living room, and next to that, I see a statue of a dragon. I see those first. Cool, I'm all right. I look down, and in front of her couch, on this white carpet, is a black wax pentagram poured into the carpeting. And I look and I see that it's wax, and like it took a long time. And I look and I go, "What's that?" I know what it is. She goes, "That's my pentagram." And I'm serious. I went, "Oh man, I forgot. I got to be up. I got a dentist appointment in the morning. I got to go." I passed judgment. I did.
Did you feel
I did.
danger, though? Did you feel danger?
Well, you know what though? This is how the universe reaches out and slaps you. Over the next couple of years, I got to know her through friends and everything. Turned out to be one of the coolest, downest, positive, awesomest, right?
Yeah.
But it was, and we never did anything or we never dated or anything. But yeah,
You
It
made a
was
snap
like
judgment, but the reason I'm asking if you actually felt danger, right? So this is discernment and how it acts is like your example is so good. You can be in and will make these vanity judgments. But did your guts crawl? Did you get a physical, right? Did you sense, you know what I'm talking about when you
yeah,
know
I do.
danger?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you, I'm gonna say yes. I
Okay.
did.
Well, I
I
would have
did.
jammed
I
too
did.
if I felt my guts crawl. You know, what are
Yeah.
you gonna do?
I think I peed a little bit is what I did. I did.
When your
But
body reacts, you have to listen. Yeah.
I'm serious. I just backed
Yeah.
out of the like I gotta go. Um let's go back to ET for a second. I don't want to run out of time on this. Um we are in a true tangible paradigm shifting moment on this planet with everything that is going on. You
Mhm.
had mentioned earlier that you had a brief communication, which led you to believe it may have been ET or an off world presence. Can you tell me about that? And what do you think is ultimately going to happen right now in 2024 when it comes to contact?
Well, I feel like, we can come into contact with all kinds of sentiences on the Earth. The Earth is an organism, a lot of connection. The same thing is true of the universe, right? So I'm an astrologer. I study the stars too. So when we walk out of our house, we're literally getting hit by cosmic rays from Jupiter. Okay, there's physical contact coming to us from bodies in outer space. I don't know why people think it's weird that you can't have a sentient exchange. If SETI can pick it up on their big dishes, people give themselves so little credit and to human consciousness to think that we cannot pick up frequencies like that through a lot of techniques or practices. This is what the indigenous people talk about, right? I've had contact and exchanges with, the Galactic Center, and this is a very common experience for a lot of people that take journeys or psychonauting. So we 100% can come into contact and sentient exchange with intelligences that are not terrestrial or part of this, just like we could as you walk out in your yard, pick up Jupiter frequencies. Okay. So I feel like the ability to pick up these exchanges with extraterrestrials or other life forms is just like a SETI dish picking it up too, and that our consciousnesses can develop and obtain frequencies where we can absolutely do this. And I feel like as humans, maybe it's like a hundredth monkey thing that will happen as more of this starts to become more commonly experienced. People's minds will open to it, and then that's how it'll really kick off into the population, right?
Isn't isn't that entanglement? Isn't that spooky action at a distance?
I love
Isn't that
that. Yes, right? And if any particle that has once been part of something else is going to have that entanglement and spooky action, right? So if we have even an electron that was on the sun and somehow it's going to come and hit us, we're going to have like that crazy experience. And I mean, you could argue and say that's silly, but I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the movie Altered States, right?
Mhm.
And as some of our journeying and certain skilled healers or practitioners that go deep into the pulse, into their DNA, into our interior to get that exchange of entanglement, you're going to come into physical matter, physical particles, right? Maybe all the photons are even connected together if we listen to Max Planck, right? So, for heaven's sake, like there's it to me it seems crazy with our knowledge of physics that we would think otherwise, that there wouldn't be that spooky action at a distance, right? I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, because when we are talking about familiars, or we're talking about the spirit world, or we're talking about a communication, it's not verbal, it's
Right.
not a physical communication. And then we introduced an idea, which has been proven now, of entanglement. Well, the particles in our brain entangled with the particles of another brain on the other side of the universe,
Yep.
interacting in real time, not at the speed of light, but at the speed of now. That's a very, very, very strange concept. But it's exactly what we've been talking about this entire time. And it's like
Correct.
the human race has got amnesia. You know,
It does, and that's why it's so important for I wish every physicist would support indigenous, and go back to these practices so that they could have these experiences and understanding, like it's like we've forgotten it. But any experience you have, if you really go psychonauting, I mean, deep enough, what happened to me was you come out of time space and you see that that's only one dimension, right? So if you go past the 4D, like you said, it's not even in the now. It's in it's in a place that time and space is only another dimensional part of it. So we're so limited in our collective understanding of this that it is like a massive forgetting, or like but I'm hoping that as more and more people get blown open to experiencing these multiple dimensional experiences, hopefully we'll have it'll trigger some kind of group remembering. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
well, such a great point, because so many scientists and physicists and theoretical physicists today will say, I mean, deservedly so, but they don't understand truly what they are saying when they repeat themselves, saying things like, Einstein thought of this stuff without ever seeing it. And it's like, okay, well, and he thought, and then he put it, and then and then it turned out later he was proven to be correct.
He actually got a
And
lot of it from his wife, who studied with Nikola Tesla, but that's
what
beside the point.
it's Whew, well played. But maybe he channeled it.
Correct.
Maybe it
Yes,
was sent to him. Maybe it's the same thing that Moses was talking about.
that's right.
Just maybe every indigenous culture on this planet, on every continent that has been talking about this, is talking about the same thing. And Tesla probably channeled it himself.
Well, he had
Except Tesla,
visions. He was very
right?
open talking about the visions, which I agree, the majority of scientists, and this is I actually gave a lecture on this, which is on my YouTube station. If people are interested, how do we know things? How have we known things? There's all scientists, you're going to learn it from someone else, you're going to deduce it, you're going to induce it, but it turns out so many scientists throughout history got it from dreams, got it from visions, right? Got it from these sentient exchanges. Socrates gets it from a familiar spirit. So I'm sorry, but a lot of scientists, much like creatives, were informed by familiar spirits. 100%. Yes.
Or yes, that, and maybe time travelers.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Interdimensional experiences. Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. When you look at the work of, I don't know if anything is original, right? Everything is taught.
There's nothing new under the sun, as they
Nothing new under the
say.
sun. And so when you look at somebody like, Da Vinci's a classic example of that. And I think that he did his best to try to explain that he was going somewhere else and spending alone
Mhm.
time,
Yes.
right? And now, wait a minute here. Who was he talking to? Right? Was he connecting to spirit? Was he connecting to his familiar? Was he entangled with something in another galaxy? I don't know the answer to these things,
Mm,
but people like him and other great thinkers that seem to have manifested these inventions and thoughts and ideas seemingly out of nowhere.
right.
No, ultimately everything is taught.
I mean, there's only like, if I stick you in a room somewhere and you have to figure something out, right? It's like solving a puzzle, okay? If you only have a certain amount of data information, where are you going to get the rest of that data information, right? You can't get something from nothing, as they say, unless you're like us who understand otherwise. But it has to. There's no from nothing was something, right? That Bereshit idea. So where's the thoughts coming from? You think? Yes, sure. Some people figured stuff out. 100%. I would never denigrate human intellect to say that a lot of people have figured out a lot of stuff just by looking and seeing. They're like, oh, this goes like ta-da. That happens all the time too. But then there's a lot of certain things that 100% they weren't figured out. They were received through some form.
Yes, 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 yes. One of the arguments that I will lay out when it comes to this is one of the most fundamental changes in humanity, and it was the domestication of wheat. Now, we are talking about taking something that was nearly worthless and too much work to make it worth something. I'm talking about wheat originally. It was too much work, right? Too much work. But we are suggesting that Stone Age man out on the savannah getting chased by very terrible beasts, instead of surviving that and protecting their family, he's going to stop and go, wait a minute. I got it. I need to genetically alter wheat. Right?
No. Well, if you look, and I have a chapter of this in my book where I talk about there's a familiar spirit known to the ancient Egyptians. They had names for all of them too, by the way. They had names of the spirits that gave them the knowledge of agriculture. So it's not even mysterious, because if you read the papyri, if you read these texts, the humans are saying, we received this from these creatures. I mean, honestly, they're described as creatures, the watchers, these things told us the things. So like, you can't be so naive as to think that this data wasn't received. And however you want to describe it, you want to call it a familiar, an extraterrestrial, we're just having a relationship exchange with these other consciousnesses. And that's really how we figured out how to make wheat. Otherwise we wouldn't have figured it out.
That's right. That's right. And why isn't it okay, just okay, to contemplate that?
Yes.
To discuss that, instead of the argument, which is always the one that you hear, right? Oh, you're just not giving Stone Age man enough credit. Right?
One of my favorite bullshit things that I ever heard when I went to acupuncture school, I asked my teacher, I said, how did they figure out that these acupuncture points, if you hit it, would heal these diseases? It's crazy, right? If you've ever had, I'm like, how the hell did they figure this? Who figured this out? And my teacher goes, well, in the books, it says that they would like get shot by an arrow and figure out and I was like, man, what kind of thing? You get shot by an arrow and you figure out it cures diabetes? Like, what are you talking about? This information, when you look at it, it was received by the Chinese people from serpent beings that they describe in the books. And so everybody's, like you say, they're trying to say it's the Stone Age people. Like somebody got hit with a stick and they figured it out. No way. No way.
And do you believe that he or she, your teacher, I don't know if it's he or she, believed what they were saying?
I don't think they ever even thought about it. Like you said,
Right.
like they never had it. I think I was the first freaking person to ask them that question, and they had never even like sat there and wondered. And I do think it goes to what you stated earlier, is that we can't enter into these states of wonder anymore, because they're so full of this. They're reading a book with all the data, and they never just sat there and thought about it.
Where can everybody, Maja, perfect show tonight. Just
so fun.
Absolutely divine. Where can everybody go and pick up some of your books and reach out to you?
Oh, sure. They can hit up my website, which is witchofthedawn.com. All of my books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the usual places, and I do have links to them all on my website. I have lots of exciting stuff out. I make some films with my friend Courtney Sell about like egregores and esoteric Hollywood and all kinds of fun stuff I think you guys would like. And then I have a new book out in April. I just wrote a novel about four-dimensional craziness as well. So people can find all that on my website.
Yeah, I started, I got about halfway through it, the documentary. I think it was part 3.
Oh,
I
yeah.
seen
We
part
have
3?
like a few other ones too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to let Bill and Jonaside know in the chat. There it is right there. Put that link out for the documentary. It's very, very good.
It was really
Maja,
fun.
perfect show tonight. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation. And again, this was a perfect way for us to start 2024. Thank you for doing it with me.
Oh, it's
Perfect.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a great night. Enjoy the rest of your week. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Maja. Perfect show tonight. And now here the link is below. You can reach out there. Her books are there too as well. And we did just get up the link to the YouTube channel that has got, I think it's part 3 of the documentary series, but everything is there. I want to remind everybody what's going on tomorrow night. Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove is with us. Of course, you know that he is the host of New Thinking Aloud, and that is tomorrow night. And Jeffrey, the last time he was on the show, he's been such an inspiration to me over the last 40 years and what I do here on Fade to Black. And to have him on the show tomorrow night with us, it's an honor and a privilege. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you, Maja. Behave and be well, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow night. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.